This is Ian Williams for V3, and today we have a very interesting guest with us. As most people will know, it's the 40th anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission, which saw NASA put the first men on the moon. What people don't know is that a civilian by the name of Theo Kamecke was commissioned to capture that entire historic launch on film and create a documentary time capsule. Theo, thank you very much for joining us here today. Theo, let's start with you. Tell us what happened back in 1969.
Well, NASA knew that this was going to be the big one, and they didn't want to have just an ordinary documentary made about it. So they sought out a little film company in New York City that had a reputation of making the best documentary films, and that company asked me, a very small company, but that company asked me to do the film, and so I took over the project. And NASA was absolutely great. They didn't tell me what to do. They didn't tell me what not to do. They gave me access to everything, and just said, just make a good film.
I mean, that's pretty amazing, given that you were the only civilian allowed anywhere near the entire project.
Well, for certain things, yeah, because they couldn't have the press mucking things up. They couldn't create a circus, or there would be mistakes, distractions, all that. It wasn't a matter of secrecy. So at launch control in Florida, where it's called the firing room. It's a very large room with hundreds of technicians and scientists in there, and they didn't want any civilians in there, just from a distraction point of view. But they let me in. I was the only civilian, and even the cameraman that I was using had to be a NASA employee, so that he would know what not to do.
Right.
And that was kind of a remarkable experience, being the only non-NASA person in there and standing next to Wernher von Braun watching his toy rocket that he dreamed of since a kid going to the moon.
Excellent. And tell us a bit about your procedure of making the documentary and kind of what you were looking for when you were making it.
Yeah, well, there's any number of ways you could make a documentary film about that, but I decided to make it simple, to make it like a tale told of an epic adventure, and to make it have a human content to it, so that it would work either then or sometime in the future, and somebody could look at the film and not be perplexed by the technology, and get a feel for what 1969 was like on Earth. Excellent.
But now, given that, I mean, the huge popular interest, especially at the time, and even over the years, in anything relating to space travel and sort of lunar expedition, why was this footage and this documentary you created was never released to the public?
Well, that's not exactly true, but the public wasn't interested. You know, that's a misconception. People have not always been. At the time, they were very interested in the flights to the moon, but they got all of this from television, so they weren't particularly interested in seeing it in a film, even a good film. And so, if the public wasn't interested, the distributors weren't interested. It was just out of luck that somehow it got shown at Cannes, and got some notice and got picked up by some museums in New York and shown to the public for a few weeks, and that was it.
Right.
But then it just sank into oblivion. And even 20 years later, nobody was interested.
So, I mean, the footage now has finally been recreated into a DVD. I believe it was actually lost at NASA's own footage of it was lost at one point.
It's hard to believe, but a couple of years after Moonwalk was finished, the Technicolor plant out in California closed down its operations and moved 30 or 40 years of Hollywood films out to some storage vaults in the desert, and somehow it got misplaced, or it was shipped back to NASA and they misplaced it, but the printing elements were gone, so you couldn't print it anymore. And it turned out that the complimentary copy, 35 millimeter copy that I had, and I'd kept under my desk for decades in these big steel cans, was the only copy of the complete film.
But I know that a gentleman by the name of Dr. Chris Riley then discovered that you
Well,
had
Chris
this...
was working on another space film, and he kept running into. He was researching, and he kept coming across footage that he knew must have originated with my film, Moonwalk One. But they were trying to track down these shots, and of course NASA had lost the originals. So at one point they thought of Googling me, and because of the internet they found me right away, and we had phone conversations and some emails over a few months when I was helping them with suggestions about their research. And then I happened to mention that I had a full copy of the film sitting under my desk. And so they began to hatch the plan of restoring it, which costs, some money, and restoring it and digitizing it and bringing it out in CD with extra features, which they shot. And they did a beautiful job.
Excellent. So, I mean, for those who might want to pick it up now, what are the types of things that they can expect to see? I mean, is this a deep behind-the-scenes look at the shuttles themselves, at the astronauts? What's the sort of things that people can expect?
If they want to have a fun and sort of astonishing experience of what happened at that time, that's it. It's nothing. The technical stuff is there, but it's not overburdened with anything technical. It's just a feel for the event, something that really is a milestone in the history of mankind. The invention of fire, when we left our planet to walk on another planet. You got to mark these things down, and the farther we get away from the event, the more important it seems as a spot on the calendar.
Absolutely. But I mean, so yesterday was the 40th anniversary of the launch, and so we're kind of in the midst of that entire.
Right. They're at this point, 40 years ago, they're on their way to the moon.
And what are your feelings on where we go from here in terms of space travel and things like that? Interest does seem to have died down a bit.
Anybody who attempts to predict the future is a fool. I mean, look at Stanley Kubrick's and Arthur Clarke's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Look what he predicted for 2001. Nothing at all like that has ever happened. Who knows what will happen? I imagine, given enough time, we'll be out there in the galaxy.
Theo, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to looking at the Moonwalk One DVD director's cut for myself. I hope you guys have enjoyed this insightful look into 1969 and the Apollo 11 mission.